Hi, everybody. Gene here. Welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast. For every single week, we answer the most common and uncommon questions about tapping and EFT so you can eliminate self-sabotage and take the action that you want. Over the course of the last 5 weeks, we've been doing a series on healing fundamentals, and there's actually 4 more parts to this series. But because of the nature of everything that is going on in the world, I did an interview last week, which I think makes a lot more sense for me to introduce into the podcast feed right now. So next week, we will return to the healing fundamental series.
Compassion fatigue, for anyone who's working with clients, whether you be a therapist, a coach, any facilitator, means that you sort of got too wrapped up in what that person is feeling. You're feeling it too intensely, and you can't get that professional distance.
This is Gene Montrastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 464, originally aired June 10th, 2020. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Today, we are going to be talking about compassion fatigue and how that is different than burnout. Before we do that, just a quick reminder, we have a free 10-part guide on how you can use tapping to eliminate self-sabotage. All you need to do is go to tappingqa.com, click on the big blue button, and you will be able to get that free 10-part guide. So over the course of the last few weeks, I have been doing a number of interviews for the podcasts that are going to be happening over the summer and into the fall. There are lots of really, really great interviews. And just to kind of timestamp all of this podcast is going live on Wednesday, June 6, 2020. I'm not exactly sure when you're listening to this. The interview that you are about to hear was recorded on a week ago Monday. And it was recorded in the midst of all of the social unrest in response to the racial injustice that happens inside of the United States. And I thought it would be useful to share this sooner than later. And the moment that I realized that it was important to share this sooner than later is on Tuesday of last week, as all of this was unfolding. I was tapping with one of my Black clients, and she showed up for a regular coaching call, which was supposed to be business related. And because of everything that was going on in the world, that was obviously not the thing that was at the front of her mind, and that was not what we tapped on. And in the middle of that tapping, I don't know if she realized this, because when I'm working with clients, I wear glasses that have yellow lenses on it. That's to deal with the fatigue from looking at the screen all day. So you can't really see my eyes because you're really seeing the reflection from the screen. And as we were tapping, there were a couple of moments where I got teary myself. And the reason that that is the case, like normally I'm able to keep a very particular keep a piece of distance from my clients because I'm showing up in a clinical way, and that's what a good, healthy practitioner does. In this particular case, even though I'm not experiencing what is going on in the world the way that she is as a Black woman, I am in the middle of all of this too. And there's a difference between burnout and compassion fatigue, as you'll see as we get into this. Compassion fatigue is when we are experiencing the issues that our clients are experiencing. And we are doing it in such a way where it makes it difficult for us to be present. And because what is going on in the world right now, between the pandemic and all of the issues that have been around for hundreds of years that are being brought into the fore to have a really direct conversation about, it is something that we are all in the middle of. And so therefore, I thought this was a great conversation. The conversation is with my friend, Robin Bilazarian. Robin is a licensed medical practitioner, and she has, as you will hear in this, has worked in some of the toughest tough places with helping people who, on a daily basis, are dealing with trauma. She has supported doctors and nurses. She's supported police officers. And so she has seen firsthand people who are impacted personally by this stuff that they are dealing with. The thing that is really lovely about this particular conversation, in addition to being able to get some clarity in the difference between burnout and compassion fatigue, which is important to recognize the difference, she breaks down some really specific things that we can do on a daily basis to ensure that as we are trying to be helpers and helpful, we are able to do that in a healthy way. So here is my conversation with Robin. To start off, I have a sense of what this means, but for you, what does compassion fatigue mean?
So for compassion fatigue, for anyone who's working with clients, whether you be a therapist, a coach, any facilitator, means that you sort of got too wrapped up in what that person is feeling, that you're feeling it you're feeling it too intensely. And you can't get that professional distance. So usually compassion fatigue means that you're working probably with too many people that have trauma, and you're not able to distance from it. And so you go home and you look like a trauma client yourself. The term compassion fatigue was actually coined in 1995 by psychologist Charles Figley, and he was doing research at, I think, the University of Southern Florida. And he is also the editor, or was the editor, I'm not current, of Traumatology magazine, review, sorry. And so he was saying that what the phenomena that he was seeing is that helpers of all types were looking as disturbed as the trauma clients. They were lacking sleep, they were shaking, they were not functioning at home, they had cognitive impairments, and they were just overly reactive to the same trauma and traumas as their clients, and reacting in the same way, sleep problems, all kinds of things. So that is how compassion fatigue is often referred to. Some people confuse it with the word burnout. Burnout actually means that you're doing too much of something, and you're just tired of it, but you don't have the residual psychological impairments that you do from compassion fatigue. So a good case of burnout. I'm older. I am burned out on cooking meals. Do I worry about it? No. Do I think about it much? I don't. But it doesn't bother me. Whereas compassion fatigue means that I'm taking home and experiencing what the clients are doing. So having said that, let me take a jump on this if you don't mind. The jump is that what I'm saying to you is usually the compassion fatigue is that you're taking home your clients. You've been triggered in some ways to take home the upsets of the clients. But what's new right now, particularly with this COVID-19 virus, is that we used to have some professional distance. And the professional distance was your trauma. It was your house that burned down.
Right.
It was your family where this happened. And that's not happening right now because we're all in this COVID-19 together. We're all in the same boat, if I can say it to you. And so,
and as you're talking at the beginning about this idea of bringing stuff home, one of the things that I often talk about with the people who I am coaching who are coaches is the phrase that I use is it is good and responsible for me to be sympathetic with my clients and to be empathetic with my friends and my family. And when I become too empathetic with my clients, I am jumping into the quicksand with them. And so it sounds like in some way you're talking about that distancing that is disappearing, where it can feel like we're doing a real service by trying to feel as deeply as we can. But one, you talked about the problem of creating distance, and two, the consequences of us bringing that home. Am I hearing that right?
that's absolutely right. That we don't serve ourselves, and we need to always prioritize ourselves as number one, that we're taking care of. We're taking care of our health and our mental health and our physical well-being and our spiritual life and that. And also, we're really not that effective to the clients.
Yeah.
We're really not. And so, again, if I connect it to what's going on right now, so I have pretty severe asthma. And so I may be listening to 6 clients a day, and 4 of them are worried sick that they are not going to get a ventilator if they go into the hospital, that there won't be enough ventilators left.
Right.
And so I don't have professional distance anymore because it's also my concern.
Hmm.
I don't morose over it, but listening to it for 4 hours a day,
Right.
it does give you sort of a wake up like, oh my goodness. And by the way, the other place that we felt this, I've been a therapist for a long time, is after 9/11, we felt that same lack of distance from our clients. I'm about an hour south of New York, and I was doing some counseling up there for about 4 days using EFT, by the way, with survivors and family members. And so we were all freaked out about what had happened in the country, about what happened to them, but it also happened in my country too. And
Right.
so we didn't have the professional distance. And when that happens, I'm going to beg any coach, any helper that's listening to this, stay close to your colleagues because you need to process it. And when 9/11 happened, again, I'm in New Jersey. New Jersey did a ton of things for us. They retrained us. They gave us a whole bunch of debriefings all over the place. My agency was debriefing us weekly because that's what happened. Also, if you're a helper, I'm going to tell you, and I guess I'm fledgling here between compassion fatigue and trauma. If you'll
Yeah.
bear with me for a second, but they're connected. If you are working with anyone in the crisis that we're in right now, and as of today, we're in two crises. We have the COVID virus, but we also have a huge racial injustice issue in our face. And it's true, there is that going on. But these are traumas, these are national traumas. And we were taught after 9/11, watch out for your trauma clients because one trauma reminds you of another.
Mhm.
And so they're not only reacting to what's going on today, they're also reacting to their past early horrific trauma. And
Yeah.
they're interrelated.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually piece apart two different things that you've been talking about there. One is compassion fatigue in general.
Right.
And then the second is compassion fatigue in the context when we are experiencing something together.
Yeah.
Because I think it'll be good for us to dissect the first so that we can see the application of what's going on today. So in the initial definition you gave of compassion fatigue at the top, you mentioned the fact that oftentimes it's showing up because we are doing too much. Could you kind of elaborate on what you mean by that? Is it too much of a certain type of client? Is it too many clients in a time period? What does too much look like, and how does that start showing up for someone? Because I'm guessing each of us have a slightly different threshold based on the topics that our clients are talking about and things like that. So what does that kind of look like initially?
Yeah. Well, you just hit the nail on the head. I think it's who triggers you.
Okay.
And so if you have trauma in your own background, say you have sexual trauma in your own background and you're
Mhm.
working with a lot of people who have been sexually traumatized, you are at high risk of developing compassion fatigue. But if you're someone who has empathy for people who have been through that horrific experience of sexual abuse as a child, and perhaps you had some abuse, but not particularly that, you're going to be at lower risk of,
Mhm.
of being triggered into your own stuff. And that's why I'm saying to you, stay close to your colleagues,
Right.
because your colleagues will help you process out what you need to process.
It's interesting you say that because oftentimes when we're doing something in a vocational way, where we're stepping into something that's coming from a place of passion, it's coming from a place of we've been there and we want to help the people who are going through it now. And so in some ways, it becomes an asset, being able to speak to experience and being able to really truly understand what someone is going through. And there's a flip side to it that also is, if not trauma, at least scar tissue that I am carrying around from having that particular experience. And so I guess if you are doing that sort of work for something that you are driven from that experience, it's important that we're hypervigilant to be really making sure that we're speaking from this place of passion about the thing and we're not speaking from the wound and how quickly one can fall into the other.
That was incredibly well said, Gene. That was incredibly well said. They talk about wounded healer
Mm-hmm.
as being more compassionate, more empathetic, more intuitively able to get to those spots because they know it. And that's the flip side. That's the positive side
Mm-hmm.
of working in your passion. I think that, doing too much of it, burnout, if you will,
Yeah.
is not a problem because you're just working with too many people and you need to slow down and you need to
Right.
take more time, to have more, a strategy for your self-care and things like that. I think when we're talking about compassion fatigue, We have to watch how we get triggered and how hard we get triggered
Right.
and build in some breaks. So, for instance, one of the things that I do, because I've been a therapist for 40 years, that's scary to say out loud, but it's the truth. Okay. One of the things that I build into my life is I don't watch anything of horror or crime or anything
Hmm.
at night. I watch all the talent shows. I get home from work, just dance and sing for me.
Right.
Okay. Just dance and sing for
And
me.
as you say that, I can remember the day I watched three Law and Orders in a row, and as the fourth one was starting with this crime scene, I'm like, why? Like this, and literally, it was just this moment of like, oh, I don't need this. It's nice to have a story that wraps up in the drama and the acting and all of that, but I just went, no, I don't need to see a fourth horrific crime at the beginning of the fourth hour, and I was just done because of that exact same thing.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing too is protect yourself a little bit from the news.
Hmm.
The news is important to see, and I'll watch 10 minutes in the evening and 10 minutes in the morning. I'm aware, but I'm not going to watch 20
Yeah,
moderators dissect the same story all
absolutely. Yeah,
day
yeah.
long because that can throw you into a compassion fatigue too.
I want to ask something that runs parallel to this. I had a friend of mine who worked for a national agency that was dealing with the protection and exploitation of children. And she was very, very much on the front lines. And I won't get into details because it's unuseful, but it was a really difficult job. And I was talking to her about her work one day, and she said, the instant I start having a family, I have to do different work. Like for her, she recognized the ability to have some professional distance on these things. And the instant that she was going to start going home to one of her own children, that she just preemptively said, there's no possible way I'm going to, and maybe she could have managed it. But the fact that she recognized that about herself it sounds like the type of self-awareness that you're asking people to have. So we're making sure that this isn't happening is that particular awareness that Christine had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what you can and can't work with. A parallel to what you just said is when I was working at the hospital I was an employee assistance counselor for 14 years at a trauma hospital, and I was on the crisis debriefing team. And I'm going to tell you, this hospital had the helicopter, and they saw horrible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We never got called if it was an adult. Okay,
Right.
we always got called if it was a child, if anything happened to a child. And it's because every one of those nurses were young mothers.
Right.
And they all, young mothers, they were. The nurses and the docs, they're all young parents, And interesting, even in working with cops, because I've worked with a fair amount of cops in that position too. The ones that came into me that would sob, they would sob in session. Watch a big inner city cop sob, you want, and they would say, I don't know why this one got to me. And I would say, I do. It's a child.
Right.
How close in age is this child to your child?
Yeah.
And so you've got to watch what triggers you, and to be able to take care of yourself, because ultimately that's our first job.
Yep. We've talked a little bit there about kind of preemptively, what are the things that we can look out for to try and prevent it? Day to day, symptomatically, what are the things that people should be paying attention to where they need to start asking questions if this is what I'm experiencing?
Watch how you are when you come home from work. Okay. If you have half an hour of quiet, okay, that's fine. You just listened to some very difficult stories and situations, and you do have compassion, or else you wouldn't be a helper in this field. But watch how long that lasts. Does that go into the whole night? Does it go into your sleep?
Yeah.
Does it go into the next day? Are you irritable? Somebody asked you to do something pretty minor, and you erupt like a paratrooper, like a stormtrooper. Are you irritable? Are you anxious? Are you jumpy? One of the signs of trauma and compassion fatigue is that you're having that startled sleep. Ask your partner, how did I sleep last night?
Right.
Okay. Watch where your sheets are in the morning. Are they still on the bed, or did you destroy them and everything's tossed and turned?
Right.
And pay attention to that stuff. And again, I know I'm being redundant, stay close to colleagues.
And I don't think that's something that we can say enough. It is so important to be in a circumstance, one, to have someone to be able to go, yeah, I get it. Because oftentimes our partners, our loved ones, or whatever, they can have an appreciation for the work that we do. They can appreciate for a passion for the work that we do, and they don't understand the work that we do. They're just never going to get that particular thing. So it's good to have that. And the second is, I was having this conversation last night with a friend of mine. We're just such notoriously bad eyewitnesses to our own experience. And I was mentioning the fact that I have a half a dozen people in my life who, when they call me on something, I pay attention to it. And there are a lot of people who troll me for my work and whatever. And I'm like, that's fine. Like it just comes and it goes. But there is this group of people that if someone says, okay, we need to talk about this thing, this is something that's an issue, I might get hurt in the short term. I might feel offended and they're attacking me. And then I take breath and I go, okay, you're on the short list. You're one of the people I take serious about this. And so I don't think you can say it enough to make sure that we're around people who truly understand what we are going through, because they're able to give us perspective that we don't have because we're inside our own head.
Mm-hmm.
So then what are the things that we do if or once we're starting to recognize that this is going on? Because I am guessing it's much kind of like an overheating engine. That as an engine overheats, there's problems. And then once the engine overheats, there's no slowly cooling the thing down. How do we respond if we're starting to recognize that this is what we're experiencing?
Well, Dean, you and I have the answer because we share a passion in the emotional freedom technique and tapping. Mm-hmm. And so that is how you cool your engine.
Yeah.
That's how you cool your engine. And not only that, I actually think that it is the antidote to even having compassion fatigue, because you're doing this with clients. Mm-hmm. So you're doing it in conjunction with clients. So your client says, I'll use an old case that was real. So my client says in his child abuse, his father made him eat vomit. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if you're hearing this at home and you're going, ew, that's what I did too. Okay. That was disgusting,
Yep.
But we're now tapping on it. And he's talking about, and my father made me eat vomit. And my father made me eat vomit. And I'm tapping as I'm doing this,
Yep.
I'm tapping on the side of hand, top of head. And my father made me eat vomit, inner eyebrow. And my father made me eat vomit. And so my first 3 times I'm tapping, I'm squeamish. I'm sick. Mm-hmm. My stomach is turning. I'm nauseous. And then when I get to about 0.7, it's like, oh, how horrible was that? And so what I'm doing is I'm taking down his upset, but I'm taking down my upset at the same time. And so prophylactically doing EFT with trauma clients is my cure, mm-hmm. if you will. And I use that word strongly, cure, for compassion fatigue. Okay. Yeah. So I think, I have a couple of kids and they were in college at the same time. And
right.
Good grief, did I need money. I had to pay 2 tuitions. So I was seeing 11 clients a day and lots of really serious stuff. And I was tired at the end of the day, but I was doing EFT all day long with 11 clients. Mm-hmm. And so I did not take stuff home.
And it's interesting you say that, because for me, it's a very different experience, because when I'm working with clients, even when really horrific things come up, in almost every circumstance, it's a data point. And I am, even when horrific things are being talked about, like I don't have that level of disgust or whatever. But for me, it's, I am 7 blocks from the East River. And I walk down to the East River and I sit in a bench and I watch the boats and I tap. And I just always describe to folks, I'm like, I'm just letting my brain uncork, is the way I try and describe it. And just literally, and in most cases, it's less than 15 minutes, but just kind of beat by beat, working through the day, seeing what's sticking around, because I'm sure you have this as well. I call it clinical amnesia, where like I won't remember what my third client and I talked about because I've moved through so many things through the day, but I'm paying really close attention to the things that are still clinging to me in some way that I didn't notice viscerally in the moment, but obviously have stuck to me in some way because they're still there. And so even though I was tapping with them, I have to be really intentional at the end of my day to make sure I'm getting clear and clean. Otherwise, it's residue, and it's going to impact everything that happens after that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that is your strategy, and it's a fabulous strategy.
But then strategically, and you talked a little bit about seeing the news a little bit and whatever, but like when we are in an experience where we are co-experiencing something that is horrific along with our clients because it is something that is societal or cultural or in the moment, strategically, what are the things that we can do so that as we are having conversations and working with clients throughout the day, that we're making sure that we're not getting to that point of overheating?
Well, I know I'm going to be redundant. Number one, do EFT with them.
Yep.
I think I'm more visceral than you are, more kinesthetic.
That's because you have a heart and I don't.
No, I think I'm much more emotional, if you will. I'm probably way more right-brained. I have a left brain, but I'm way more right-brained. And so I actually go into it with the clients at the time,
Okay.
not to their degree. So if they're a 9, 0 to 10, 0 to 10, they're a 9. I may go into it. I may be a 5.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm not. So taking it down with the client at the moment is very beneficial to me. It's very beneficial to me. And I hit 0 to 10, if you will, before they do, because I don't go quite as high as they do. And so we clean out all the emotions and the physical manifestation in your body. Right. I feel a lot of stuff in my body, kind of thing. And so the EFT and the tapping is very helpful for me. But, other things too, because see, I'm not a purist. Other things too, you're talking about walking around a river. There's an area in my thing that has this magnificent lake. It's probably 3 miles from here. And I have a dog. Yep. Okay, so the dog and I walk there at least once a day. We've been there already today. And, you want to have a strategy on what it is that you know. Now, for instance, I'll tell you another strategy with compassion fatigue. What's happened to us with this COVID-19 is those of us that were seeing people live in our offices, we are all now virtual, whether it be through Zoom, whether it be through FaceTime, whether it be DoxyMe, whatever you're using. And that means that for 6, 7 hours a day, we're looking at a screen. And we're not used to that. And so I tried to explain this to someone by standing 2 feet away from their face and saying, how comfortable are you? Okay. Right. So I'm on a screen right now as we're talking, but behind my screen was a bookcase, an open bookcase, and a white wall. Well, that white wall is now a collage, okay? And it's a collage of roses and the ocean, not the calm ocean. I like that vibrant ocean. Right. Okay, a couple of vibrant pictures of family, not the and things like that. So it's roses, it's flowers, ocean, and family that's behind me, so that I can I'm calling them eye stretches, if you will, because just looking at the screen, it overwhelms me for that. Well, I'm looking intensely at the face.
Yeah, of course.
And it overwhelms me. Whereas if I was in an office, I would see pictures and wallpaper and all that kind of stuff. And so I think we have to figure out we first have to identify what is knocking us out.
Yep.
Okay. So for me, it was like, oh man, staring at the screen all day long is knocking me out. And maybe people will do that all the day. They have their own strategies. And then we have to figure out, where do we feel it in our body and where do we feel it? Then we use EFT to release it. And after we do that, then our brain works. Yeah. I think that after we release all that emotional garbage, our brain works and our brain goes, oh, I can make a collage. Okay, It's not a fabulous collage. They're all downloads on my, from my printer. It's not anything,
The other thing that you're talking about, the sense of strategies, I love fire drills. And one of the reasons why I love fire drills is when I was in 5th grade, there was a fire in my grade school. And it was a small fire and it was no big deal. It was just this tiny little kitchen off the gym. It was contained, but 600 little kids got out of the school without issue. Like it was just, oh, cool, we get to see fire trucks. There was no sense of panic. There was no sense of concern because we knew exactly what we were supposed to do. And we're so much more likely, any tool, to reach for it if we've practiced reaching for the tool ahead of time, so that when something goes wrong, each of us figuring out what the specific strategies are that work for us and recognizing these are the red flags for what is going on, and just in our brain practicing, okay, when I physically feel this way, or when I have this sort of thought, I imagine myself reaching for the tool, and then in the moment, I'm going to be much more likely to do that specific thing. The other thing I wanted to circle back to in what you said.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And I would actually write out a coping strategy.
Yes.
Sit there and just write it out. What is my coping strategy? How do I take care of myself? Work is harder right now. Again, I'm in the same boat as my client. I don't have professional distance. Yeah. This is not their problem. Their problem was they're fighting with their husband, their colleague, their child. Right now, they're talking about things that affect me 100%. And, they're talking about people that have died in their lives, and my neighbor died. And, so I don't have that professional distance. Right. And so I think we have to work even harder.
Well, and as you say, working harder, I actually started treating myself like a preschooler. I made a little bitty chart and I started giving myself gold stars when I started doing the things to take care of me, because there was one day where I was completely knocked out. And I wasn't even working with clients that day, but I was just knocked out. And every time I got fuzzy headed, I went, okay, and I did the thing and I gave myself a gold star and had to be even more deliberate about my tools because I'm paying a tax right now that I normally don't pay because I'm in the middle of it as well.
Yeah, I agree. Let me throw two more things on there, okay? Because these things psychologically help a lot.
Yep.
And one of them is gratitude, and one of them is forgiveness.
Yep.
Okay. And if you can and look around and find anything you can be grateful for. I'm grateful that my husband has figured out how to color my hair.
Yep.
It was quite a stretch. Okay. I wasn't sure the marriage was going to make it, but we made it. I'm grateful for the dog. I'm grateful for the beautiful spring. And when you do that, you enrich your capacity to cope. And there's actually some research that I just read that said that staying in gratitude actually helps you physiologically. Okay. And the second one is forgiveness. Okay. And forgiveness is, in my opinion, is the absolute antidote to anger. And being angry is just not going to help you individually. It's just not going to help you individually. So forgive yourself for anything you feel, because that's what you feel and that's the way it is. And try to forgive those people around you for doing the best that they know how to do, that they, and because when you do that, you release it, and don't forgive them for their sake, forgive them for your sake.
Yeah.
Okay? And if I can, basically Nelson Mandela said something like, holding on to anger is like swallowing poison and expecting it to kill others.
Yep.
Okay. And so forgiving, and again, if the act was so horrible, you don't have to forgive them for the act.
Right.
Please don't think you have to do that. But if you can forgive, the situation didn't go better.
Yep.
And that would be okay too.
I'm going to put in the show notes. I actually have a resource that talks specifically about what forgiveness is and what it's not, and a whole tapping sequence for that. So I'll draw people to that as well. The other thing I wanted to get your thought on, it sounds like one of the red flags for us when we're dealing with this sort of thing is if a client brings something up, because the example you gave is my client is at a 9 and I'm at a 5. And so I'm guessing one of the red flags is if those numbers are inversed. If my trigger is higher than my client's trigger, then that's not this gentle nudge. That's giant blinking red light saying, okay, this is something that is really extreme that we need to be paying attention to. Because if I'm higher than my client, they're going to beat me to 0 before I'm going to get there more than likely, which means I'm still carrying this stuff around.
I agree with that. And I also think that if you do find yourself there, okay, take a minute between clients, take a minute, do some of your own tapping, bring yourself down, go for a walk, look out the window. Movement's also very important. Movement. And you know what, I'm having my clients, I'm calling them dance hissy fits. Okay. Turn on the music 3 to 5 minutes a day. Not a day, per session.
Yeah.
And just dance like nobody's watching, because nobody is watching.
Well, and I actually
move.
I actually here on my desk, I have a menu of what I do on breaks. And so I have breaks scheduled throughout the day. And so again, it's a strategy. So I'm not having to think about what to do. And there are stretching exercises and my foam roller and movement and dance and a Zazen breathing exercise and like all of these really specific things, but I don't have to think. I just have to know I need to do something. Oh, this is the thing that draws my attention right now. That's the one I'm going to go and do. So I'm reducing the load of trying to take care of myself by reducing the decision tree and just being able to be responsive so I can take care of myself easier. So I'm taking less tax and energy to do that.
Absolutely. Have a coping strategy. And one more thing to put on your coping strategy.
Please. I want more tools.
Humor.
Yeah.
Oh God, please learn to laugh at yourself. Laugh at the human condition. Pets are pets and children. Okay. Yeah. I mean, don't laugh in the children's face, but get a chuckle and enjoy the little antics of both of them, and anything else that you can find humor at. Do watch sarcasm. Sarcasm has some anger in it, kind of thing. And so you don't want to be sarcastic about things unless they have nothing to do with you and the person that you're with. And if you want to be sarcastic about something outside of the two of you, that's probably okay. But be careful about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And inside of direct messages on Twitter, the only thing that goes back and forth between my sister and I are just animal videos. Like that is in that medium, that is our entire communication, is just sending silly animal videos back and forth. And those are just and then the other part is I now know where this library of really fun videos are that are all
Oh, you're going to
36
share that with me. Yeah.
Well, I'll send you a whole bunch of them. They're good stuff.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, great. The thing I think that I really appreciate about this is, and I want to circle back to, is the really clear distinction that you made at the beginning between compassion fatigue and being burnt out. Because I can see how easy it is for us to mistake compassion fatigue for burnout. And as you've so clearly articulated, the causes are different. The symptoms are similar but different, and the remedy is very much different between those two things. And so if folks are taking nothing else away, I think being able to draw the comparison to those two is one of the most valuable things that you said, because I had never, we had a conversation before we got on the line and texting back and forth about what this would be about. But that was a real revelation for me to just see that so starkly and clearly. So I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, Robin, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I hope you found that interview as enlightening as I did. There at the end of the interview where I'm talking about the things that I learned, I was telling Robin that was true and honest. Like going into the interview, I didn't understand what compassion fatigue meant. I thought it was just burnout, because we are healers and we are dealing with difficult things and we're more likely to be burned out because of it. And you can see it as something that is really clear and really different. In the middle of the interview, we talk a little bit about forgiveness. I have added a link in the show notes to the podcast where I talk about forgiveness. So if you're on the website, you can see that right above the player. If you're in your podcast app of choice, if you go into the show notes area, you will see that link. You can also on the website in the show notes find a link to Robin's stuff and all the great work that she is doing. I love the way that she teaches. She's succinct, she's direct, and she's someone I truly enjoy. If you know someone in your life who could benefit from this, and this is really a prescient piece of content, please pass it along. Don't spam your inbox, but if there are some people in your life who are helpers, and you know that they are being run down in the middle of all of this, please pass this along. If you are able to help them be healthier in all of this, they are going to be better as helpers as they are helping the people around them. If you have questions or comments, I can always be reached, Gene, Gene, at tappingqna.com. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the podcast. In podcasting parlance, subscribe is always free. You can go to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, inside of whichever app you're looking at, just hit subscribe or follow, and that way when new episodes of the Tapping Q&A podcast come out, you don't miss them. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Montrastelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Montrastelli Tapping Q&A. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Montrastelli and Tapping Q&A.